I forgot to unmute myself. Yo, what's up? Welcome to the energy report for Q2 and the month of April 2023. I'm super profesh. Don't worry about it. So, first things first, thank God March is over. That's my feeling about it. Technically, we still have some hours left. It's March 31st as I record this. However, it's on its way out, and it's been a long time since I have been so happy to be done with a month. That was very, very, very intense for me. And looking back at the energy report that I recorded last month, which PS, I was really wanting to shift over to doing these as Instagram lives, but there's something up with my phone where it just makes terrible noise interference. It just sounds like there's a fan running in the background. And I apologize because that was the case for last month's energy report. So here I am back to Zoom. Not as fancy and exciting, but it'll do the trick. Anyway, I re-listened, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 11 days into March, back to the energy report I had recorded because I totally forgot after I recorded it. And I was very thankful that I did. And I was very thankful that I recorded that energy report because it helped to anchor me back into the remembering that, like, yeah, when you're like, when you are calling in big things, a lot has to get excavated. And that's how it felt for me. It was really, really like, oh, like I feel like I got like scraped down right into the like basement layer of all of my shadow shit that I'd rather not look at, just like everybody else. That's how we feel about it, right? It's like it's not pleasant stuff down there, and yet that's what we got to do. So that's what March felt like for me personally. Also, I've described it as being squeezed through a cheesecloth to like being like raspberries being pulverized through a cheesecloth to, end up with the nice, perfect raspberry puree, and all the seeds and the fibrous bits are discarded. I've also described it as feeling like being pounded into a fine powder with a mortar and pestle. In all of those analogies, I feel as though I was being refined into a finer version of myself, a more refined version of myself, and it was uncomfortable. How was it for you? I would love to know. So let me know in the comments. But here we are at the end of March, and I'm happy to report that I feel like the pounding finally ended for me just on Wednesday, March 29th. So the very end of the month. And also Wednesday, March 29th is when I started to see the first sprouts of the seed that I planted emerging from the soil. The whole entire month, I was like, oh my God, nothing that like my seed isn't growing, nothing is manifesting. I think my internet is being stupid too. Nothing is manifesting, agonize, like all the ego stuff. But of course, the whole time the seed was germinating, and it's finally peeked its head above the soil. And I can tell that something has really shifted. The momentum is picking up. It is moving now. And this seed is going to bear fruit. It is already starting to. I hope the same is true for you. If you want to hear more about the energy that we're moving into in this first week of April, as it pertains to everything that I'm going to say in this whole energy report, but also as it pertains to this seed we've planted and our manifestations, consider joining my Patreon at $5 a month. I do a weekly energy report there that is a 3-card spread. It's worth $5 a month just for those energy reports alone. But plus we have a Telegram chat where we can connect, and we do quarterly group hug calls. So come join. Anyhow, let's get into the energies that pertain to us as we move forward, though. So first, I'm going to talk about the overall flavor of Q2. And also, I rewatched this portion of my year ahead Tarot Akashic reading, the big giant one that I did at the beginning of the year. And all of that holds true. And there is a new dimension to it that I am going to speak to now. So I advise going back and rewatching the year ahead one and fast forwarding to these cards I don't think the timestamps actually match. Sorry. But go and listen to that because it's still extremely, extremely relevant. But there's something more pressing that needs to be spoken into right now. So the overall flavor of Q2 is a little hard, not gonna lie. It is the Nine of Swords. So as I said in the year ahead reading, the good news about the Nine of Swords is that it's a minor arcana card. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a big deal. Bad news of the Nine of Swords is that when you're in it, it feels like a major arcana thing. It feels like a big deal. It is the card of the realm of like the nightmare, but it's a self-created nightmare. It is like all of the agonies and the fears of the mind just fucking with us and, you know, like haunting us essentially. And that's going to be the flavor of this whole quarter, meaning April, May, and June. Now, don't fret, don't worry, because I genuinely, to my core, do not believe that we are all going to experience like a 3-month-long nightmare. I believe that this is speaking about a specific segment of the population, but it's important for us to know because it's going to affect the collective consciousness, and we're all part of the collective consciousness, and we need to realize what's coming. So I'm going to give a little bit of context before I go into the card of April. In March, I started talking about this tsunami that I feel coming. It's the way that it's an analogy. Like I'm not talking about a literal wave of water coming to crash on any beach. That may happen or it may not. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm just using tsunami as an analogy to describe what I am feeling approaching. And that is a huge, huge wave of awakening, like a massive, like bigger than a tidal wave, literally a tsunami sized wave of awakening that is about to crash up on the beach and devastate the illusion-based structures and belief constructs that we hold individually and collectively. And I felt it starting in March. So in March, around the equinox, I felt like, it's almost like before the equinox, I felt the water pulling back in preparation for this tsunami to start itself. It felt like a lot of energies, like individuals withdrawing into themselves and pulling back. It just felt like a pulling back energy. And then around the equinox, I felt the tsunami begin to unleash, and it's like rolling towards the beach, but it was still way back in the ocean. So, you know, if you were on land in this analogy, you're not seeing it yet. You're not feeling it. If you're super attuned, you're feeling it. You're feeling the just the energetic subtle shifts, like the difference in the, you know, the behaviors and patterns of the birds and the insects, and you're feeling like a different quality to the air. And you noticed that the tide was like at a very, very, very low point. And if you're astute, you could put all those things together and be like, oh, there's a tsunami coming. We got to get off the beach and get to high ground, which is how I have been feeling. So as we speak right now, March 31st, sorry, told you I'm professional. March 31st, 2023, the tsunami is still out in the ocean, but it is, you know, racing forward toward the beach. And I feel that in about 2 weeks' time, around mid-April, is when it's really going to come crashing up on the land. And we need to be aware of this and make our preparations so that we're not taken by surprise. But again, I'm not talking about a literal tsunami of water. I'm talking about a tsunami of awakening. And this is where I think that the Nine of Swords comes in, because this awakening, what it feels like to me, is an initial awakening of many hundreds of thousands of people who have never been awakened before. This is like the people that I speak to, most of you who are going to listen to this, you're listening to me because you found me through the concept of spiritual awakening to some degree or another. You have already experienced at least one awakening, and it is a spiritual awakening. I feel like the awakening that is coming is more of a rude awakening to the reality that we are in a false matrix and we're being fucking lied to and we are being harvested off of. And like, it reminds me so much of the energy of 2020. Like, so many people who have just been trucking along in their false matrix 3D lives and have been content enough to do so, I suppose. It's like some trigger event is going to happen for them. I don't even think it's going to be one event. I think it's going to be many events, a whole bunch. Like, this awakening is on schedule. It actually has nothing to do with the events. The events are just the thing that help us to make linear sense of it. But something is going to trigger them to wake up to the reality of the situation we're in, but there's not really going to be a spiritual dimension to it yet. And so it's going to be like realizing that, we have been at the hands of like narcissistic sociopaths, which is true. But realizing that for the very first time, it's also going to like stir up all that shadow shit, like all like what I was describing that I was experiencing in March. It's going to be all that being stirred up for hundreds of thousands of people who it has never even occurred to them before that they have a shadow, or that like trauma from the past needs to be looked at and integrated. Like, none of this is on their radar. They're just like taking their kids to hockey practice or soccer practice and like doing the groceries and watching the game. And like, it's not like totally believing in the matrix, totally believing in the narratives. So I foresee that the collective consciousness is going to feel pretty intense and unpleasant for the next few months. And that's really what I think that this Nine of Swords is talking about. It's like being rudely awakened only to find that you're living in a nightmare that for whatever reason you could not previously see. And like scrambling around for answers and also feeling that sense of outrage though that comes from the realization that somebody's been fucking you over. Like, I recently I just had this realization like on a personal level in January, and I was like furious. I'm cool now. Like, not like it's okay that somebody fucked me over, but just like, it's fine now. I've processed all that, moving on, integrating everything more deeply. But for a while there, I just had to feel like outraged and incensed and like, I had to fully clock the degree of the skullduggery. And I foresee that is what is coming in April. Like, as of mid-April, for the next 3 months is just going to feel like that in the collective consciousness. We're just going to be, if you are empathic, which I imagine you are, and if you're anything like me, March, one of the other things about March is like, it stripped away a lot of remaining layers of my protective shell. So it feels like I'm way more porous, even though I still have firm boundaries, but a lot more information comes through. I just know how to deal with it better. And my empath dial has been cranked up like 1,000 notches. Like, I feel people so strongly right now. I feel the collective energy so strongly. And so it's going to feel, like kind of not enjoyable. I also feel like as all this shit gets stirred up, people, and they're in their state of outrage, they're not going to be ready to take their power yet. They're going to be hyper aware of the ways that they've been victimized. And so the victim program is going to be very loud, and people are going to feel, it reminds me so much of the energy of the George Floyd incident, and then all of the riots that ensued, where people were just like, at an irrational, in my opinion, from my perspective, up here in Canada, not actually being surrounded by it in its like peak intensity, what it looked like to me was people were irrationally outraged. Not, and in no way am I saying that they shouldn't have felt outraged. They totally should have, about a whole bunch of things around all of that. However, the irrational part was the like this feeling of like, you owe me something because we've been fucked over, and what has happened, you know, to George Floyd, the optics and the reality, all of it converging is like bullshit, and we won't stand for it anymore. So the logical thing to do then is to go into the streets and fight amongst each other, throw bricks through windows, destroy businesses and homes, and commit great acts of violence and destruction and pull down statues. Like, do you know, that's the part that I'm saying is kind of irrational. But it was, the reason it was irrational is because it was rooted in this like incredibly powerful, activated trigger of victim consciousness. And that does need to be like acknowledged and validated, because it is valid. When you wake up and realize that you've been fucked over, yeah, there is like, you have been victimized, and you have to acknowledge that in order to move to the places of your greater empowerment. But it's just, you know, it's not a pleasant place when we're there. And so for the next 3 months, I just feel like there's going to be suddenly like hundreds of thousands more souls online at a level that they previously were not. And they're going to be grappling with what all of that means. And I think it's going to take a while before they even get to the spiritual awakening part. At first, they're going to be in like red hot reactionary mode to the 3D level of everything. So the card for April specifically is the Two of Swords. And they like the two of them together don't really paint a pretty picture, do they? Like foreboding and ominous and dark. However, the Two of Swords, it's speaking though to that personal power that we have, even when we're in the throes of our ultimate victim narratives. It's that undeniable like realization that we have a choice of what we're going to do with this information and this new level of awareness. And so the Two of Swords represents like having a decision to make. And in the year ahead reading, I was talking about like, you know, whatever, we've picked a path, we've planted a seed, it's happening. And like, we're starting to agonize, like, did we make the right choice? Blah, 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 blah. All of that, totally true. And the Two of Swords being like, shit or get off the pot. All of that, super relevant as well. But what I didn't go into, because I didn't feel it at that point, is this place that we're moving into, which is like part of the newly awakening group is going to feel like very tempted to not awaken. And they have a decision to make. Like, am I just going to willfully go back to sleep? And mark my words, some of them absolutely will. And it's okay. And we don't need to judge them. It's all going to be fine. But it's that being confronted with that question of like, do I want to actually awaken to this and acknowledge and accept the nightmare that I now find myself in, that I've been in this whole entire time and just didn't realize? Or do I want to like willfully go back to sleep and just be like, I can't see you. No, 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 no. I can't hear you. It's not there. And, you know, just watch reruns of Big Bang Theory until we die. There's more about the Two of Swords that wants to come through as well. Just a moment. For a lot of us, I feel like there's also going to come a fork in the road that is, I don't think that there is a major arcana version of this card. So I feel that even though it's minor arcana, it's a pretty important fork in the road. You could say that it is the further separation between the 5D timeline and the 3D timeline. And I still nevertheless feel that we are all moving towards a singularity. So it doesn't matter if somebody appears to be going on the 3D timeline or is going on the 5D timeline, we are all converging at the same point at some time in the future. But we still do have to make the choice. We do have to make the choice. I had a conversation with a client probably back in January, honestly, about the labyrinth. And she was seeing like life as a labyrinth. And that really got me, churning through this as an analogy. And what I could understand is like, yeah, we are being called to pick a path. Like, so we can't see, like it's a labyrinth because it's convoluted and there are dead ends and we have to like go back and retrace our steps. Like it's not a linear direct, it's not like the path, there's one path, you see the destination and you're just walking forward. No, there's like, are you going left or are you going right? Which way are you going? And you know that both paths lead to the center of the labyrinth, like lead to the exit from the false matrix. But the left path is going to be very different from the right path. And one isn't better than the other, but one is more aligned than the other for each of us. And so I feel like in April, there is going to be this choice point that is important. It is important. And it can be very, very subtle because it might not necessarily manifest in terms of, are you like a physical manifestation, like, are you going to stay here in your hometown? Or are you going to move to the new place, like the new city or the new country or whatever, it might be like an inward decision to finally let go of a drama pattern that you have carried around for your whole entire life. That's a monumental choice point, a monumental fork in the road. And this is the suit of the swords, meaning it's the suit of the mind. So it might manifest physically, but it's rooted, this choice point that I'm feeling into is rooted in your perception, your cognitive, mental perception of yourself, the character that you are, the identity that you are creating for yourself, who you are in the world, your perception of life and the world, the universe, like, any other players involved. It's all a perception thing. But the great news is it's very much in your control because it's all a perception thing. The other thing that I want to say too about these energies is that, so I've been describing what I really foresee coming for those who have not awakened yet. And this is like literally their very first awakening, literally. And it feels like it's going to be a shit show. And it feels like it's going to affect us and it's not going to affect us. So again, if you are listening to me, I would dare assume that it's because you have already gone through a spiritual awakening to some degree or another. And I mean, certainly there are always new levels of spiritual awakening. That's what March was for me, was more spiritual awakening. I feel like it's always, but it just gets easier. You recognize a dark night of the soul as a dark night of the soul, or you recognize a new layer of awakening as a new layer of awakening. And you recognize like, oh God, I'm just integrating so many changes and it's a contraction and it feels like a squeeze and a drag and it feels really hard, but I know that it's going to lift and there's going to be so much clarity on the other side. Like the more often you do it, the less fazed you are by it, even though it still doesn't feel pleasant per se while you're in it. So I think that we're all going to experience it differently, dependent on how many times we have been through our own next level of spiritual awakening. But again, I don't want to suggest that it's, it's going to be easy for any of us, or without discomfort. That's a better way of putting it, because I do feel like it's going to be easy. I don't feel like it's going to be without discomfort for any of us, but that it's not going to be as hard as it is for those who are waking up the first time. And this is really what we signed up for. And this is why we volunteered to schedule our own awakening to come on the earlier side, whenever that happens to have been. Even if you're brand newly awakened and you awaken at the very end of 2022 or something like that, like literally December 31st, 2022, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so new to all of this. It doesn't matter. That's still an earlier awakening point than this new one that we're moving into. And every time that we go through this, we integrate new truths, new understandings of truth, and new wisdom that we then have to share with those who are, like behind us on their journey. They're just behind us chronologically. They are no less powerful. They are no less divine. It's just unfolding in this linear way according to time as we experience it. And so I'm also not wanting to set anybody up to dread April, because in fact, I feel that April is going to be a very, very beautiful month, a very, like it's going to be super intense in the collective. But for those of us who are awakened, we're really going to be feeling some of our superpowers come on board, and really feeling like our manifestations are just going to take off, like absolutely skyrocket, which is super exciting. And just like the more that people awaken, the more codes become accessible to all of us. So it's a gift, and we just have to be kind and patient and just hold the highest frequency that we can for the rest of the collective that is brand newly awakening and is sort of flailing about and floundering with the intensity of it. But we are all like cells in the same body, like it doesn't make sense to get mad at the other cells. It's we all benefit, like a rising tide raises all ships. And so the tide is rising, and some ships, this is their first awareness of the tide rising. And so they're going to be like, what the fuck is happening? And the rest of us who have been through a couple tide rises are going to be like, oh, it's cool. It's cool. The tide is rising again. It's all good. We now have access to more of ourselves, more of our consciousness, more codes, and let's just focus on it that way. The energy of May is definitely a progression. So we're not going to be sticking through this for very long. It's going to be a relief, a bit of a relief in May, even though, collectively the nightmare is still going to be going, but it's all happening for the better. If we can just get through it. I described it for my Patreon energy report, for the weekly report, as like, it's a rude awakening. And it's kind of like when you wake a toddler up, or a toddler gets woken up from their nap before they were ready, and they're just like such a sour little bear. Like they're so like, meh, and like, no, I don't want my teddy. No, I don't want a treat. No, blah. They're just angry. And you just deal with it, because you know it's going to pass. You know that eventually they will forget, they will get distracted, they will integrate the fact that they are now awake, and they will move on. They will, they're just in their victim story for a while. It's fine. They're just angry at the world. And then eventually they will get tired, and they won't want to keep that up, because there will be too many cool activities and things to do, and they'll get over it. And that's really, I'm not saying that the awakening group is at a toddler level of consciousness. It's just an appropriate analogy to describe like, we just got to be patient, just hold the highest frequency that we can as, everybody moves through it. Know that a rising tide raises all ships, and really anchor into all the codes that are being made accessible to us through this, that are being, it's like pieces of ourselves and pieces of our truth, puzzle pieces to the collective puzzle that we are being unlocked. And now they're back in the public, collective noosphere, accessible to us through osmosis, through our psychic gifts and our telepathic networks, which is onboarding more and more powerfully as we go. And if we just focus on that, then it's going to feel, I feel very optimistic about April. It feels very enjoyable for the already awakened community, temporarily not so enjoyable for the newly awakening community. Okay, I feel like if I talk anymore, I'm just going to be repeating myself. I hope this was of value to you. If it was, please like. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And if you think somebody else would benefit from hearing this, then please share. Things to remember about the newly awakened is it is not your job to awaken them. You cannot save them. You cannot alleviate their discomfort. And you cannot, they're already overwhelmed. This is not the time to try and get them up to speed unless they come to you and ask. Just let them be at the phase that they're at, and then let them naturally progress to the phase where they're like, I want to know more. Can you share your perspective with me? Just, you're just hugging them. You're just patting their back. They're like, it's like your friend at the party that's puking their guts out. You're just holding their hair back and saying nice things and rubbing their back, and hopefully handing them a wet cloth or some tissue to wipe their faces off. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to remember. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know how the energies have felt for you in March and what you're feeling in April. I love you all so much, and I will catch you next month for our next month's energy report.